It's the Morning Star Drive 117.8. You soaring up with sky, now's the time, don't delay. I'm sitting in my ride and it's time to fly. So let's realign, just listen and fill your mind.
Hey guys, how is it going? And welcome to the Morning Star Drive on 117.8. It is Monday, July 17th, and so happy for you joining us. We are ready to start another day and another week together with the Lord. So subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on SoundCloud, and make sure to support us on Patreon. So today we have an exciting podcast for you. We have 2G Talks with Eddie Kweon, the Sunday Message Word Study, and of course commentaries, updates, and news on what is happening around the world in this history today. All right, everyone, how are you doing and how was your weekend? You guys must have enjoyed it because I really enjoyed mine. It's still really sunny at the moment. It is 25 degrees. It's Sunday afternoon. How was your weekend? What did you guys do? Anything exciting, anything special? Would love to hear what you guys did. If you haven't yet, leave a like and comment to build our community. Just really happy for everyone joining us every weekday on the Morning Star Drive. Let's get up, support each other each and every day. This week's Sunday message, loved it. It was a hungry message. God who makes the right history at the right time. So many realizations, things that were just exploding in my mind. Basically, Sunstream took us to school on Sunday, and just so much that during the sermon, I had so many realizations just listening to Proverbs. I was missing other Proverbs because I was thinking deeply about the Proverb like 2 before that. I was like, whoa, that's really deep. And it made me think a lot about the time period we're in right now. But yes, I think all of us went to school on Sunday. It was awesome. But we'll get into that in the second segment when we go into the Sunday message word study, right? Friday. Okay, so I had a very eventful weekend. Now, I'm not sure if you guys are like this, but this is what I'm kind of like. I told you guys I get a little bit obsessive, or I get extreme in things, right? So Friday was my day off. I get Fridays and Saturdays off. And, I did all the things I needed to do. And then I was just like, it was like, what time was it? It was like 6 p.m. or something. And I was just like, man, I got nothing else to do. And I was thinking to myself what I should do. And, I thought the first thing in my head was like, oh, you know what? We just got that pressure washer 2 weeks ago. So just the inspiration in my head is let's just go wash the cars. I'm like, let's go wash the cars. And let's go meaning just me, my spirit, and my body. So when I told you I get a little bit extreme and obsessive over certain things, the moment I made up my mind to wash the cars, I went straight to Walmart and I started getting all these, like I got these microfiber rags to wipe the windows and wipe the car down with. I got this Armor All protection for the dashboard and stuff. I just got a bunch of stuff that I needed, right? And for me, I was really excited about this too because it's the first time I can use my foam cannon on my pressure washer. It's like this bottle you put soap and water in, and then this foam just spits out of the pressure washer. It's kind of cool, but yeah. So I spent a few hours just pressure washing. I think it was like 2.5 hours. Well, it includes like vacuuming the car and, doing the windows and, spraying down the dashboard and the middle console, stuff like that too. And I just spent like 2-3 hours on it. It was very therapeutic. Okay. But there's something that happened while I was getting the car, what do you call it? The all the accessories and stuff and the cleaning products I needed for the car. You're walking through Walmart and I see this big sale. And after getting all the stuff I needed, on the way back, I thought to myself, what do my parents need? Like, I'm already going to wash the cars for them, but I was like, what do they really need right now? And the one thing my mom told me like 2 weeks ago is that their coffee machine is leaking. Just like a regular brewing machine, right? I thought to myself, I was like, you know what? Let's go get them. I'm going to go buy them a new coffee machine. So lo and behold, I go to the coffee section and there's this huge sale on coffee machines. And it was $15 for a coffee machine. I was like, whoa, that's so cheap. But then, in my head is like, but this is probably a really cheap machine. And then I start to justify myself like, well, it's my parents and they don't really have they don't really get expensive coffee. I just started asking, in my head, I'm like, oh, but do they really need a good one? Like, what do they really need? And I was like, okay, let me find, and the one that's $15 is obviously like a no-name coffee maker brand. Like my parents don't have a very good one either. It's called Cuisinart, and it's not a very good coffee machine. It's like kind of like a basic one. And then there's like Mr. Coffee machines too, and that's not very good either. And those were pretty good sales, anywhere from like $40, $50. But as, I'm looking at this coffee machine and I'm like, I can get this for them. And while I'm thinking about what kind of machine should I get for them, like how expensive should I get it? And I'm telling you guys this, there was a voice in my heart. And guess what the voice was? The voice was, honor thy father and thy mother. So it's like the fifth commandment in the Bible. And I was like, dang, Holy Spirit, okay, you got me. You got me. So I ended up going to 3 different stores to look for coffee machines, and I eventually found one that I thought would fit them, fit them properly. I ended up spending like $100 on it, right? So it was interesting because I sat there like contemplating with myself, like, oh, do I really need to get it like this expensive? Do I really need to get this? And honestly, I was thinking to myself, it's either that $15 one, but then I was like, nah, maybe not that, something a little bit better. And I was going to get something like, it was $55. But then when I went to the other stores, I saw some other ones on sale too. And eventually I got one on sale, but it was still $100. But parents were very, very happy. Like, oh, you know how your parents are like, oh, you don't have to buy that. You don't have to buy that, right? But you can hear in their voice like, buy that for me right now, kind of thing, right? So I brought it home. Parents were happy. They're using this new machine, so it feels pretty good. So this second trip I've been back, like the last time I came, remember I got them a TV, I got them a cabinet, I got all this other junk too, and like a water, like what do you call it? Those machines that boil water for you. It holds 4 liters, and you just, they can just, because they drink a lot of tea, they can just press a button and they'll have like hot water come out. This time it hasn't been as expensive, but so far it's like air purifier, so they can live maybe a couple days longer than what they normally live, and coffee machine. I think there's something else I bought. And a pressure washer. So it's I'm trying to think to myself, what else can I get my parents? Like, what else you know what it is actually? What can I get my parents that I'm gonna actually eventually be using? Right? Pressure washer, they haven't touched it once. I did everything, right? Coffee maker, that's something they're touching, and like the air purifier they're using every day. So that's kind of cool too. But it was so interesting. Like in my heart, it's like, honor thy father and the mother. I was like, okay, I'm gonna go get a better coffee machine for them. So I got a much better brand and stuff for them also. And it's not like the best of the best. I'm not gonna get like a Breville or DeLonghi or something like an espresso machine, because they don't drink that kind of stuff. And those are like $400, $500, $600 up to $1,000, whatever it is. So I was just like, nah, there's no need for that. But yeah, it was quite interesting that I was able to that I had that experience where God's just like, come on, these are your parents. You got to treat them really well. So, yeah, that was kind of my experience I had on Friday. Saturday, of course, you guys know I had the barbecue at the beach. Have you seen my Instagram? That beach was awesome. I haven't been there in like 15 years. It was nice. It was packed. So many people. Nice trees around for some good shade. We had barbecue. We had burgers and ribs and everything else. It was so good. Had a lot of fun with a lot of the second-gen kids there who are like a third of my age. But it was fun. And yeah, there's a lot of second-gen there. I think almost all of them were second-gen that I was hanging out with. Right? And there's this one family that I've known since like 2003, maybe 2002, and before she was married, and then she got married. She has 3 kids, so I'm like the godfather, which is kind of cool that I am a godfather. That sounds really manly. I am the godfather, So I was just like, wow, that's so cool. But just knowing that I have that title with them, it makes me want to do something for them. Like I'm like ready to just call them up and go buy ice cream. Just ready to call them up and go do something with them, kind of thing. And they don't live too far away from me, so that was kind of cool. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's like a parental instinct, some filial thing that we have, like for people, like the children or people we have some type of relation with. So I was just like, I wonder, it's interesting how you want to take care of like children and kids and stuff like that too. So, yeah. You know what's kind of interesting for me? Because, now that I work out a lot, like I work out almost every single day. What's really interesting is, you work out, you're at the gym, and you're with other people who are really, really into gymming, right? They're just out there working out, and they're making their physical bodies, right? I don't know what it is, but I'm not sure about you guys out there. If you guys are people that really, really work out, do you begin to notice more about other people's bodies? You know what I mean? Like, I'm not checking people out like that, right? I look at guys and girls, I look at their posture, to see how they stand, I look at their shape. For some reason, it's just like because I'm so into working out, I look at other people and I'm like, you're kind of like, yeah, look at that flabby arms and those flabby legs. Oh my goodness, you haven't worked out in a long time, have you? Right? Like I feel like I'm not judging them, but I'm just like, man, that person needs to work out. Dang, that person needs to work out. But I'm not saying it in a negative way. I'm just like, you could just tell people who work out and people who don't work out. I'm not trying to judge. I'm not doing. It's just because I'm working out, I notice it. I notice when someone doesn't work out. I notice when their posture is not nice. I notice when they don't have, I'm not sure what the right wording is for me to sound like. I already sound terrible already. Like I'm judging people who don't work out, but I'm not judging them. I just notice it. Like I notice that when people don't work out. And it's noticeable when people work out. You know what I mean? Like when you see someone who's in shape, you notice like, whoa, that person's in shape kind of thing, right? And when I see like, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I want to go to them and help them work out and curl the biceps, curl the leg presses, squats. Like I just want to go in there and work out with them or something. I don't know, guys. It was just a thought that I had at one moment when I realized I was noticing whether people were working out or not. I don't. Okay, forget it. Let's move on. Oh, for those of you guys who don't know, on Saturday, was it Saturday? It was Sunday for Korea, but Saturday night for me, like really late night. You know that YouTube channel with that Kim Won-hee guy? He did a live YouTube broadcast of Providence people who were protesting. Yeah, protesting against NBC and Netflix and stuff like that. It was really, there was like a bunch of members. There was like hundreds of members all in Seoul somewhere, and they were holding like an organized demonstration, a protest against NBC, the TV station that worked together to make that Netflix program, and against KDH and stuff. And like there was hundreds of people there. Plus, I was looking online, like I was watching online live, and there was like 900 some odd people watching it together with me, watching the live stream. And they were like at one point people were coming up testifying about Sunsteam. And, you know, I was watching it. It was like really late, like maybe 1 a.m. for me, right? And for me, I was just inspired, like, whoa, look at them. They're going out testifying and they're singing praises to show people that we're not afraid of what's going on. And it's better for people to really understand that this, we're citizens just like you guys. No one wants to be treated unfairly. And I was just really inspired by like, wow, like they're really doing this. I'm not sure if it was organized by Providence or not, but it was live online on that YouTube channel. It was really, really interesting. But for those of you guys who don't know, like protesting in Korea is like a cultural thing. Like protesting is normal in Korea. It is. Like you sign up with the government to protest. The police will be out there to make sure everything is safe. And it's just, this is like a normal thing that happens in Korea all the time. And for those of you guys who don't know, it all is because of this protest culture is because of the history that South Korea went through. Like demonstrations happen all the time on the streets of Seoul, right? It's all the time. And it's mainly because of Korea's political culture. And what this protesting does, it's kind of one of those, it's like a very important, essential component. And it helps us to understand the relationship between the public, right? The public and the government. So those of you guys don't know, in South Korea from 1948 to 1987, there was authoritarian rule in South Korea. And protests were the only channel citizens had to express their grievances to the state. But, now that, after 87, the country reformed as a liberal democratic society. And of course, you're supposed to have a greater ability for interest groups to engage with the state. But these public protests became even more common, right? And it continues as like the primary medium or avenue for the public to convey their interests and concerns to the government, right? And part of it, they say, like when you read history about Korea, part of it's because they're kind of in a hangover from the country's authoritarian period. Think about it. The authoritarian period ended in 1987, which is super recent, right? That's less than 50 is 87, 97, 07, 17. It's 30. What is it? 30 what? 1987 means 30, 36 years? 37 years? 36 years. So they've been in authoritarian rule for that long, like not too long ago. And there's a kind of a hangover from the country's authoritarian period. And there's like a lack of systematic interaction between the state and the public. So even though democracy came in, a liberal democratization, so citizens are now able to vote, but there still kind of remains this gap of adequate mediation between the country and the people, right? So this like protesting allows the people to kind of be part of the policy making decisions or that process itself. So protests, it's kind of like this quasi empowerment, and it gives people a sense of power. But it's not really that sophisticated, because even though you have a protest which is very, very powerful in Korea, and it puts a lot of issues on the table, even removing presidents happened. Like the last time when that Park Geun-hye went to jail, there were protests of tens of thousands that came out onto the streets, right? But it falls short of giving like the public the ability to plan, draft, implement, and monitor policies with the government. It's basically just, this is what we're worried about, and this is what we're screaming about, and the government then comes up with the drafting, implementing, and monitoring. But this is kind of why you have that type of culture over there in Korea, because it's something that is very, very common. And that's why I thought to myself, I was like, wow, this is very good, because it's not an unusual thing, but in Korea it is very, very common to have these types of protests and such. So I was really happy to see that. I thought it was good to see like us come out in public, not doing anything dumb, not saying like terrible stuff about people, but just testifying and singing praise, and that's it. Right? They're testifying, saying this is unfair how this TV broadcast station was doing it. I'm not sure if this live broadcast will stay on his channel, but I saw it live on live stream last night. But I think I heard him say that he was going to take that video down later on. But we'll see what happens there too, right? And one thing is very interesting that I noticed too is like there's a lot of changes happening in IMD and like probably like the Korean like HQ and stuff like that. But from what I've seen so far, the replacement of head leaders also in Korea, they're all being replaced by BF, by Blessed Families. Like there's a lot of roles that the Blessed Families are taking again, it looks like. So even when I was watching the protest, it was like the Blessed Families all there. It wasn't as many young people. There was a lot of families there. The people leading the protest were like Blessed Family husbands and stuff like that too. So it was quite interesting to kind of look at that and see the people speaking at the front and testifying, stuff like that too. And that's probably another discussion that we can have in the future also. I also did a recording on Friday night for Man Cave, and we're talking about evangelism. But the interesting, like this is something that I find so interesting is after, like for some reason, after the recording finishes, we go deeper into the subject. It's really we get into it. And I guess maybe because we're not on camera anymore, but we were talking about evangelism in each country and how to make bigger evangelism happen, and why we can't do big evangelism, and why evangelism is done, why most countries do evangelism in such a small way, right? And I was thinking about this for a while, and one of the things that I realized about evangelism and why evangelism is done in a bigger way is because our strategy and methods are made, our strategy and methods are for small batch evangelism. Right? I look at it like as coffee. There's small batch brewing, and then there's like commercialized like brewing or like roasting beans and stuff like that. And of course, the more smaller it is, the better quality there is also. So when you look at the strategy that we use for evangelism, because one of the reasons we're talking about evangelism is because we're talking about male evangelism too. We need to evangelize a ton of males. But the system and the way that we're doing it is basically everything is done one-on-one. Right? So when everything is done one-on-one, there is always going to be a limitation on time. Always, right? And the one thing that every leader will talk about is there's not enough manpower. So if you don't have enough manpower and you're doing things one-on-one, there is a huge limitation on how many people can actually study and pass, right? So like put it this way, one person can evangelize a person here. Let's just say our church has 50 people and there's like five 5 to 10 people that are going out to evangelize, whatever it is, and then you have like 4 or 5 people starting to study, right? You might have one lecturer or two, but these people, if they're 3 to 5, it's like they're going to study on average about 2 times a week. So that's going to be like up to 10 lectures a week, right? For those, for those people that want to study. But when you think about it, the reason why there's such a limitation is because the person's got to go out and travel. There's time to travel back and forth. There's time to lecture, time to talk, time to manage. Sometimes you eat together. And if you take all the traveling, lecturing, management, eating, whatever it is all together, how many hours is that going to take for that one time you meet that person? Which is going to be what? Anywhere from 2 to 3 hours, maybe more sometimes. So if just look at one person studying a week, right? One person studying with 2 times a week is going to be like 6 to 8 hours of time in that week. But when you think about, it's not just that one person, but you have a ton of other people studying too, right? And newcomers that study in other areas. They want to meet somewhere else. And once again, the lecturer has to travel, lecture, manage, talk, travel again, and you're limited to the amount of time. So when you think about this carefully too, is even if your church is evangelizing, like say 5 people a year, right? Let's pretend it's 5 people, the average amount of people that need to study is like 100 per person that study, which means that lecturer or the lecturers for that church who want to bring 5 people in, on average, are meeting or spending all that time on 500 people, right? So if you want to evangelize at a higher rate, we have to think about it in a different way, where we utilize time understanding our limitations, right? It's like teaching, like for instance, teaching in groups, right? Like teaching in groups, that's one way of making it work out better than taking them aside for the advanced or upper intermediate lessons or whatnot. There's one way of doing it. Now, of course, if you're a very, very small church, like 10 people, maybe 20, because I don't know, that's kind of getting out of the small church, but 10 to 20 people, there's no choice, right? Because you're only going to have like 2 or 3 people actually running full time. And all you need to do to grow properly at a size like that is anywhere from 1 to maybe 1 to 2, 1 to 3 people per year in order for you to be average, right? Like to have 10% growth, which is fine, right? So that's why for very, very small churches, that individual Bible study is fine. But when you get to large churches, like let's just pretend the Lord's Church at one point was like 2,400 members, you can't survive doing it that same way. Unless you have like 100 lecturers, right? Because you need to pass in a 2,400 person church is like 240 people a year, and you can't do it the one-on-one style unless you have like 100 lecturers, right? It's just not going to work, right? And you have other things you have to take into consideration, like not enough experienced lecturers, like the level of lecturers makes a difference. Like once again, not enough manpower to handle that many newcomers, because it means you probably have, remember, if it's 240 people that need to pass, then that's that's like 240. That's 24,000 people that are going to be studying that year to have the average of 1 of every 100. 24,000. And even like think about that. Even if you have 100 members, that's still going to be 240 per person. 240 per person for the year, and you're meeting them individually, right? And that's why I do think, if you think about it, the larger your church gets, there's no way you're going to be able to pass that many people. You just can't, right? With the style and the methodology that we're using, it's not going to work. And that's why, especially when we're thinking about, for instance, evangelizing a lot of guys in the future, or just a lot of people in general, we need to really think about better methods, right? Because look at your church, and remember, the average amount of people that actually run in the church is about 10, anywhere from 10 to 20%, anywhere around there. So if your church is 100, you'll most likely have about 10 people running, right? And if you have 100 people with 10 people running, that means those 10 people have to evangelize 1 person each, because you're trying to get 10 people, right? And that's not an easy thing, because even though you have that many people running, how many of them are lecturers? How many of them are evangelists? Like, you got to really think about the limitations that your church actually has. And it was a very, very interesting discussion, because it's something we do need to discuss. It's something that we do need to think about, is what is the evangelism strategy we're using right now, and understanding the limitations that each of our churches have. Like I said, small churches, one-on-one is fine, right? And maybe even a small church can run up to like 50 people, probably, right? Maybe go up to even 50 people. That is like considered a small church. The one-on-one is fine, right? But once you start getting into like larger and larger sizes, this is when you can no longer do things the regular way, right? And 10 people can't do everything, but this is why later in the future, the discussion will come up again. As maybe probably this week, there's going to be a lot of discussion about how building a real strong community will actually help evangelism more. It'll help with management. It'll help with not spending so much time on a single newcomer. It'll help in so many different ways that we think to ourselves, like, I see like Christian churches go out in one service, like I said last week, 100 people will raise their hands and come to Christ in a single service, right? But they'll have the strategy and the way to do it. And when I went to Hillsong to visit one time, the people who put their hands up, they go into a separate room together, not separately, one-on-one. They all go together into a newcomer meeting. And they learn about the history of the church and everything else. And then looking at their, looking at their region that they're living in, they'll be put into these cell groups, right? So they're not managed by a single person, and that one person is the only one that takes care of that person. Like, that is something that maybe a very, very small church would be very good at. And of course, some are going to say, oh, but what about the quality? What about the quality, right? And the answer is, it really depends. Like, if you look at it even right now, I want you to think very, very carefully, even right now, the way that we do it, like how many of them are like super quality of all the people that we evangelize? How many people left? How many people were against us? How many people, like if you look at it, yeah, like you think to yourself, it's like everyone needs their own designed plan. And the answer is yes and no. Yes and no, right? And we have to be, I really think that, in order for us to evangelize, we have to kind of switch the mindset that we have that the only way to truly evangelize is one-on-one. And I really, I think that if we're going to grow really big, it is impossible to do it that way. Impossible. There's no way the church will grow though at the current rate that it is right now. Look at your churches. How many churches are pulling in 10% a year? And the answer is probably, from what I know, is probably zero. From the churches I know. It's probably zero. Look at all in the West, like in the foreign countries. How many are pulling in 10%? They might have pulled in 10% or even 15% for 1 year, but what about the average, right? The average for how much you normally put in for a church, right? And a lot of times they're like going, it's not about quantity, it's about quality. And the answer is no, that is incorrect. It is about quantity and quality. And how do you get that? It is finding the best system that works to get both. Like, what is the middle ground that you can get both of these things, right? And that's why evangelism should be a big discussion, especially if evangelism is something we're supposed to be doing. I don't think that if your evangelism hasn't been working the way that you've been doing it, what does that mean? It means that we're not really getting that many people or good quality people. If that's the case, then why would you not discuss and try to think of a better one, but keep doing it the exact same way you've always done, right? Not thinking about yourself as an individual, as the entire church. And that is something that, it was a really, really great topic to think about. It was. And unfortunately, it was done, in, all this conversation, like the big bulk of the conversation was done, or like maybe the most meaningful part of it was done after we got off the recording. But, you guys will get to see it, and you get to see the start of it, and it kind of gets your juices flowing. And I think that's kind of the purpose of these types of like man cave and this one here discussing evangelism, that you'll start getting the juices flowing. Then right when it finishes, you'll probably have a lot of things to discuss and talk about too. But I want to get your thoughts on this too, and your comments of what you think about evangelism and our strategy right now. Like, is it really working? And like, I just don't, the statistics, I know like statistics are not the only thing, but you kind of get to see that it's not really growing that much. It's kind of steadily staying the same. The amount of people leaving, the amount of people coming, and it doesn't really grow that big. Either way. So, I said it, Chris. There you go. I said either way again. But I think it's a better way to put it than saying, ooh, oh. I'm so conscious about this now because I want that $100 per episode. Yeah, okay. So, that was a really, really good discussion we had. I hope you guys enjoyed that. So let's move into the first break of the day.
Please don't let me down, Lord. I know I can trust you with all my heart. So I'm on my knees praying for you to always come through. Even if I pray all night, all I want is for your will be done. So I'm on my knees praying for you to always come through. No, I'm not slipping through. No, I'm not falling down. The only thing that's falling is my knees on the floor. I'm praying, Lord, will you give me strength? Lord, will you give me power? I can't do this myself, so bless me in the morning hours. All the demons test me, but they will never shake me. If I pray, they hate me. If I pray, you love me. Connected with you is the only thing that matters. And honestly, I couldn't be happier. While I'm praying on my knees, I trust you with all my heart. For you always come through. For myself, for my family, for myself alone I pray. Please don't let me down, Lord. I know I can trust you with all my heart. So I'm on my knees praying for you to always come through. Even if I pray all night, all I want is for your will be done. So I'm on my knees praying for you to always come through. I pray to never just settle for good when great is available. Who's the mastermind behind this mind? I give all the credit to God, that's why I'm back. They mad that I made it, I know that the Satans, they hate it. I keep working hard just to make progress. Now I'm on 10, trust the process, ayy. Look at my efforts lately. I'm setting conditions daily. I'm praying on my knees, so bless me. Please bless me, please bless me. Tribulations always come and go. I will never stop, just always know. Your focus determines reality. Stay solid, that's why I'm praying on my knees. I trust you with all my heart. For you to always come through. For myself, for my family, on myself alone I pray. Please don't let me down, Lord. I know I can trust you with all my heart. So I'm on my knees praying for you to always come through. Even if I pray all night, all I want is for your will be done. So I'm on my knees praying for you to always come through. SB.
All right, so let's get into today's Sunday message word study, and what a hungry message it was. I was not expecting the message to be that hungry, and people were telling me, like, the leaders were telling me, like, Sunstein wrote like 41 pages, and you can tell it was hungry. It was a masterclass. It was totally a masterclass, and I was just like, whoa, like he went so deep into it. There was just too much for my brain to process. The God who makes the right history at the right time from Matthew chapter 16, verse 3. Loved it. It was all about time. What is the time that we're living in? Living firmly without wavering. What's the best way to do that? And, God is making this history fitting the time. So, man, it was so good. And I think that introduction just said it all. The word is perfect. The problem is us. Like, can we hear the word, right? And, even if we hear the word, do we understand it, right? Do we even understand it properly? So I was looking at that like, man, it was kind of crazy. And I really, really enjoyed it. So the scripture analysis on that, there's just too much in the word. I can't talk about every single part, but it was so good. Where do I start? Because there was like 77 proverbs. There's some deep parts in there. So many answers. And guys, did you guys hear the part where you finally got your answer when it comes to, what is Sunsea's mission of this time right now? And a lot of people, I told you guys that as the time goes on, the answer is going to come out again. Like, there's no need for people to freak out about what he said. Like I said to you guys before, exact same thing happened in 2008, and it kind of reminds me of one of the messages that Sunseam told us is those who know will not waver. If you know history, you will not waver. And that's why I loved a lot of like the different old videos that we saw, seeing the things that we ourselves were not participants. I'm starting to get too far ahead of myself, right? So let's get into the Proverbs are just so good. I'm going to start off with the first bit of Proverbs, like I think like 2 and 3. Like, first thing that we should know is that God's history doesn't delay. One thing about we know is like it was said all throughout the Proverbs is God's history is like time. Time does not stop because you don't feel good. Time doesn't stop because you don't think something, I don't want to do this anymore. No, time continues to go on. It doesn't matter how you feel. Time just moves, right? There's that one proverb about, guess what? Even if there's like the worst destruction and tribulations all over the earth, guess what? The earth still rotates regardless. And in the same way, time continues. There's no delay. God makes time continue regardless of what is happening. Even if, think about it this way, even if the Messiah was crucified, time continues. It still continues, right? And this is why we're going to know, right? Looking at the time period, how do we know what time period we're in? Look at the time, right? It's like looking at a clock. You can see the clock, and we're like, if we can't understand this, then we're going to have to go over a lot of these time lessons again, right? Whether it's going to be, what time lessons do we have? Like rapture, we have time times half a times, we have history, so many different things that if we knew it, we'd be like, gosh, that makes so much sense, right? Because there's a ton of people, like the proverb said, number 5 is like, yeah, there's a ton of people who follow, but they're not even that sure. They even testify and preach without even being that sure. They're not even sure, right? So we have to understand that if we are like that, we become just like John the Baptist. Now you got to think about what the message was talking about is people who are in this history but don't really know, even though they're in the history. And the biggest example is John the Baptist. When I was thinking about this for a while, I'm like going, wait a second. John the Baptist was predestined. He was someone chosen by God, right? Because, we can think about what happened this year from March. It's almost a similar thing, like a John the Baptist, the person that was predestined, the person that's given 80% of the word, the person that's preparing the way for the Lord. And yet that person still came to Jesus and said, are you still the Messiah or not? And it's kind of like today, like that, it just sunk in so deeply that there are a lot of people that do follow, but they don't really understand. They're not really sure, and we think to ourselves, oh, but they were testifying. Oh, but they were preaching. Oh, but they were running hard for this history. But when you think about it, it's like, yeah, it makes sense because who else would have been even the strongest at it? The one who baptized Jesus heard God's voice from heaven saying, this is my son whom I love. Listen to him. He heard God's voice, right? He knew the mission. Just like a lot of people today in Providence know the mission, but yet at the end of it, when things became really difficult, what did John the Baptist do? He wasn't really sure anymore. He wasn't sure. And that's what it's been like over in 2023. We see a ton of people leave, and what's happening is it means that ultimately they weren't really sure. Does it mean that they didn't know the mission? No. But the interesting thing is, the moment something came out about the mission, like, oh my gosh, he said this. Oh, what does that mean? Oh, it's been wrong. And then they leave. And this is why, if you don't want to waver, if you don't want to stagger, you don't want to shake, you need to know clearly about this history. You got to know about it. Or we end up just like John the Baptist, who was at the highest of high positions, And yet, even he came and said, guess what? Are you really the one? And if you understand John the Baptist, like his story really well and how important of like how massive a figure he was, then when you understand that, it shouldn't be as surprising of what happened this year in March. It shouldn't be that surprising. Why? Because we've seen it time and time again in the Bible. Not only in the Bible, you see Judas Iscariot, you see John the Baptist, you see the people of this time period, you see the people all throughout history. It's all happened before. Which means if you've seen it before, you're going to be like, I've seen it. I've seen it. Right? And that's why you don't waver. That's how powerful it is. All throughout history, you're going to have these people sent by God. Remember that video? Like, there's a bunch of proverbs that were shown in the video about, the two charts. One is Egypt and Canaan, and it's comparing to the Old Testament, New Testament, Complete Testament. Like, everything is repeating. You raise the bronze snake on you raise a bronze snake on a stick, right? And then what happens? Then anyone who gets bitten by a snake, they just have to look up at the bronze snake, right? And then you won't die. Like that's what it's saying, right? But in the same way too, that's the exact same thing happens in the New Testament time with Jesus, right? In the same time, even Jesus compares it. Was it Jesus or was it Paul? Look at John chapter 3. John chapter 3 verse 14 says, just as Moses lifted up the snake in the wilderness, so the Son of Man must be lifted up, right? So remember, John the Baptist, Jesus is quoting this in John 3:14, right? In the Old Testament time, the people sinned, so the venomous snakes came and killed them. But there was a snake raised up on a pole. And if people look to that pole, even if they're bitten, they're not going to die. And he says, in the same way, what's happening at the time of the time of Jesus? People sinned again. They go against the one that God has sent, right? And what happens? Then you have these venomous snakes that are coming in, and only those that look to the cross, the Son of Man was put up on the stick, right? And the exact same thing, it's like you're comparing those exact same two times, right? And when you look at that, it's like, yeah, it's a repeating history. It's happening again and again and again. Joshua goes into the land of Canaan. We look at the exact same thing happening right now. And I look at that as like, if you just know history, history will shatter doubt. History will shatter anything that is said wrong. History will shatter, like, we know that, Satan's out there to take out the person that God has sent, right? And he's going to use every trick in the book to get to you, right? So when I looked at that, I was like, yeah, we have to know it. Like, I'm telling you right now, we're already on 15 Proverbs, and there's so many of them I missed in between because my mind was overtime, like, oh, that's so deep. That's so deep. Oh, and I started thinking about tons of different things. Like, even from like Proverbs 16, which is same as probably a verse too, right? In the future, it's going to be like a Bible, right? All the land of the ancestors was given to Joshua when he went into the land of Canaan. He took back the land. All the land that was taken away was given back to Joshua. But he says, in this time period too, from the east to the west, we are in the history of returning to Canaan, just like Joshua, right? But the interesting thing is, the Proverbs 16 says, all the places where the ancestors live. So look at the places of the ancestors where Christianity thrived. Those places will be given to the new time period. Tell me that's crazy. Like, that is something that's just kind of mind-blowing. That, like, just think about, like, Italy, Europe, North America, right? Like, South America, all these places where Christianity is thriving, it's going to be given to Joshua and to the next generation. So, I found, I was like, wow, like, maybe, I'm not sure if we'll see that in our lifetime, but that is powerful because it's the exact same thing that happened before, right? So, another thing that I thought was quite interesting is you kind of get a glimpse of what the people who left are saying about Sunstein. Remember it from the 18th proverb is like these ignorant people say, oh, Sunstein is the Moses, right? That takes them out of Egypt into the desert of Zin, and then another person will come to take the next generation into Canaan, right? And that's why some people are saying for the people that have left and started their own church. Like, you get a glimpse of what they're saying. We may not have ever heard that, but from the Proverbs, you're like, oh, that's what they're saying. They're saying that Sunseav's mission is over, and now a new person, aka probably the person who was talking in March, is going to take over to the second gen. Like, that's what we're hearing right now. He's like, ignorant people, right? That's kind of what they're saying. And it's always those people that say such things. And when does it happen? It only happens in tribulation, right? Because that's when the mind gets confused. In tribulation, the mind gets confused. In tribulation is where, the people that shake begin to shake even more. And that's what's happening even more so right now in this time, 2023. This is in the biggest tribulation, and we see a ton of people thinking in this exact same way. So when I looked at that, I was like, wow, you get a glimpse of what the other side is actually saying against us, that Sunseav's mission is over. But guess what, guys? It was the exact same thing that was said in 1999 when number 2 also tried to start a new movement without Sunseave, right? And he was like, now it's time of the moon. The sun is shine brightly. His time is over. Now it's our time. It's the exact same thing that was said in 1999 when number 2 kind of split off and did the exact same thing. It's all about whether we know or not. And when you look at history, history is made, and a lot of it is made without us knowing a lot of it. Like, I like the great example that Sunseave gave in number 38 when he says, look at what we're doing. We actually made it without knowing the full plan. But when we matured, we were like, oh, this is what it is. And a lot of times we're stuck in that same position. And there were such great proverbs that Sunseave gave from like 39 and on, talking about, like, has anyone ever participated in every single thing that's happened in this history? And the answer is absolutely not. You only, like, even if I've been in Province for 25 years, I don't know what happened for 25 years because I didn't participate in every single thing. I can already think about when I first came to Providence. I came to Providence in 1998 in September. I think it was like a month later, or like maybe the same month, there was like the fall sports festival. I had a chance to go, but I didn't go. I didn't realize what that was, right? Was going. That was the last one before the first half of history ended. I didn't go to that. I don't know what happened during that time. I wasn't there in the first half of history when they're doing the bulk of the making of Wonmudong either. We only participate in what pertains to us. What pertains to me? It was missionizing Western countries, going from country to country, but I was only there like 3 to 6 months at a time. What does that mean? Which means that the other times I wasn't there, which was even longer, I had no idea what was going on. We only participate in what pertains to our mission, our job. We don't see everything. But just because we don't see everything, does that mean we could just start, ignorantly saying, oh, there's so many promises that weren't fulfilled? No, we can't, because we don't know. Not a single person has participated in every event except for the one that God works through, which is the man of mission. That's it. Because he's working through them. There's the only one person who knows all these things, and that's why he's going to write in the journal, in a book that's going to talk about all the things that happened in the past until now. Right? That's why we can't say, oh, there's so many things that were not fulfilled, because we don't know. We only know what we saw. Even, like, think about us here in 2023. How many of us know all the things going on? No, we slowly talk to more and more people, and the little bits and pieces get filled in here and there. We're like, oh, okay, that's what happened here. But even then, we only know partially. We only know partially. And that's why I thought that video review was great. That second video talking about, it was like, it spanned from 1989 all the way to 1998. And think about this, the reason why that's so great for me to look at, because I came in 1998. I came. The last thing that happened, it showed, was the 1998 passing ceremony. I wasn't there. I came after that. So that whole video that I was watching, 1989 to 1998, was everything that happened before I came. So think about this. If that's all stuff that happened before I came, and that was 25 years ago, imagine you guys who came 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 15 years ago, how much more you guys have missed. I was just like, wow, that's so crazy. So many events in 1989, 90, 92, 94, 95, 97, 90, and 5 different events in 1998. It's something that's like, yeah, you weren't there, so you don't know. You weren't there. You know, one of the ones that I was really moved by was, what was it? It was in 1994. They were at Korea University, and they were doing a prayer meeting for the nations. And I think at that time it was because of maybe possibly a war with North Korea. And you see them praying for their country. And at that moment, I'm watching that, and I'm like, that would never happen in a foreign country. Like, that desperately. Like, how hard is it to feel all that in a foreign country? And how spiritual are we in the foreign countries? Do we have that much desperation? I was like, wow, no wonder Korea was, like, the unity, how they pray, how they do things. I was like, you would find that very hard to find in like a foreign country, as much as Korea like has gone through all this together, right? Yeah, I was inspired by just watching that part of the video there. And guys, that's like we've only gone, like, now we're already up to 40. That was 41 proverbs up to that point we just did right now. There's so many. I'm gonna tell you guys this. I got to go over it again because there's so many proverbs I missed, because I'm just like, I can't compute it because I'm thinking so deeply about. You're like on number 41. I'm still on 37, thinking about 37. Like, whoa, that's so crazy, right? You know, Sunset gave a great proverb about, not proverb, a parable about going, a wedding is an all-day affair. Some people come in the morning, some people come in the early afternoon, late afternoon, and the evening, night, whatever it is. Everyone only sees what they see. So I thought that was a perfect example of why we haven't seen all things fulfilled. And some things are not going to be told until a little bit later. Like, yeah, it was fulfilled, but let me tell you now, right? So it's very, very powerful, and I really, really enjoyed it too. So I know that the river, from Proverbs 45, as a river flows from high to low, but God's history goes from low to high. That's how history is made gradually, right? So gradual history is one of the big principles that you'll learn in the 30 lessons. You're going to know that that's one of the biggest principles. I say one of the top 6 principles is the gradual history. What does that mean? Jesus started by himself, evangelizes one person, and then one more person, and then one more person, and then now 2,000 years later, we have 3 billion people. As time passes, history is made in a higher way. And if we don't raise our level, we're going to just think that things are just the same as they were before. Not because it's not higher, it's because that's to the level that we've brought ourselves to, and we haven't brought it that much higher. So I really, really, it was such, man, I can't even go over all 77. There's just too much in there. In 54 was interesting. At the end of the Proverb 54, like, Sunsee's flat out telling us, I'm talking about Jesus now for those that are coming late. And that's when it made me think, because when he talked about the cycle, it's like, yeah, in the past you learned about Jesus, then you learn about this time period, you learn about what's happening right now, and then new groups of people keep coming and coming. Then Sunsea will go through another cycle of talking about Jesus, and then we go in. It's like he goes in cycles so that the new group of people that come in are going to start learning about Jesus again. And it's happened multiple times, because if they don't know who Jesus is, they're not going to know this history and this history very well. Right? So when I looked at that, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. That totally makes sense, because he never talks about Jesus like 100% from beginning to very end in my last 25 years. A lot of times there's like these gaps where we're very, very focused on the new history. And then, a bunch of more people start coming in. And then what happens is exact same thing happens is he'll start to teach about Jesus again. Right? And it's for the sake of those that are coming late. So I think we, as those who are have been in this history for a long time, it might be a little bit boring for us. Like, oh, we've heard this before. But it's a sign that there are a lot more new people coming in that Sunset has to talk about them again. He has to, right? And I loved 58, because 58's like, guess what? This is God's own words. You will grow big like the former faith. And it's like, amen, right? Amen. 60 was like, yeah, you want to know how big it's going to grow? Let me show you all the signs. Think about all the signs in the past. the way the Ambition Masterpiece was made, the way we get church buildings, the miracles that happen through our prayers, like the tide stopping in Mongsangpo and Port Dickson. Like when you hear the song about prayer is work, it's like, the only reason you don't know because you weren't there. That's the only reason, and that's why we sing these songs, to remind people, like, do you remember that time? We don't know because we didn't participate. So I looked at that like, yeah, that's so true. And if we don't raise our level and if we don't help each other out, we're going to be like, why, like, I've never seen a miracle happen. But a lot of the times, imagine you're coming right now at this time where Sun seems a lot older. We need to testify to these people to tell them, you have no idea what happened when Sunseed was younger. Like, he's making miracles happen already right now, but some of the crazy ones are in the past. And we have video and all these other different things that come out. We have to be those that make sure this new generation understands what's going on, right? And there's just too much, right? History, this history that we're living in, number 64, is God's will. Know history and then you will not shake. Not only because it's repeated, but if you see all the miracles, all the testimonies, and the repeated history, then when when we think there's new tribulation coming, you'll realize it's not that new at all. You're not going to shake. You're not going to fall over. You're not going to regret thinking to yourself, oh, why did I react like this? And that's why everyone who's listening right now understands, right? Yeah, we're like, wait a second, what's going on right now? What's going on right now? Like, one of the big things that tons of people kept talking about is like, what they say. They're like, oh, but what is Sunseed's mission now? And I told people time and time again, like, hey, this happened in 2008. And you know what? Even in the first half of history, he did that too. He said the exact same thing to a group that he wasn't sure that were really centered on him. And then he had to restart again. Right? It's like, yeah. It's happened twice before. But if you know the history absolutely, there's no problem. No problem. Right? So when like there's like God's word, like remember when at the very, very end, it's like the original word of God and the original word of like Jesus, stuff like that. The one that hit me was the one that Jesus talked about, because he is the man, the man in mission 2,000 years ago and such, right? And now he came back again. But, he's straight up giving us the answer about Sunseed's mission and stuff like that too. There's only one person God sends in each time period, right? And then Jesus is like, I came upon him and I speak through him. Don't be confused. Don't be confused. There's only one, right? There's only one. Now, where's the part when you look at that and you say, oh, okay, I got it now. It's so clear to me, right? It's so clear. He says, if the spirit is a prophet, the body is a prophet. So Elijah the prophet came upon John the Baptist, and what happened? Elijah came upon John the Baptist, so John the Baptist was a prophet. Spirit is a prophet, the body is a prophet. God came down and rested upon Jesus. The Holy Son came and rested upon Jesus as a Savior. That's the Holy Son's mission. The Spirit is the Messiah, the body is the Messiah, right? We have to realize what that means. If the Spirit is the Messiah, the body is the Messiah. That's why Jesus is the Messiah. And Jesus is the Messiah, and his Spirit comes down and he works upon the man of mission of this time, right? If the Spirit's a prophet, the body's a prophet. If the Spirit is a judge, the body is a judge. The Spirit is Messiah, the body is Messiah. And we have to realize what I'm saying. This is Jesus himself. Jesus says, realize what I am saying. Know the mission. Know what the mission is. If you fail to realize, you're not going to be able to move on in this history. It's clear, right? Just as Jesus came, what did Jesus say? If you see me, you see God. I am the visible body of God, right? That's why he's the Messiah. We have to know fundamentally. Because if we don't know fundamentally, we only know partially. If you only know partially, you're going to misunderstand. Just like John the Baptist, even after everything was revealed to John the Baptist, once again he says to Jesus, are you the one that God sent? This is like Jesus. This is Jesus. Remember when Jesus' original word? Even after everything was revealed, people are still asking. They're still asking, what's the mission? What's the mission? And that's why our eyes have to open to the truth. Our eyes have to open to providence. Our eyes have to open to the history of this time period. It's got to be corrected. A lot of times we're putting on blinders. We're only seeing a certain way, but we don't see full history. We don't see it. And that's why we have to be those. Like, think about it this way. Remember when he's talking about kinship, the degrees of kinship? And that to that one person, that man of mission, like he says, just even like the man of mission of the time period, some people will call husband, some people say uncle, some people say uncle-in-law, someone says father, someone says son. It all depends on what you realize about the man of mission of the time period. The man of mission is completely different from us. It's different from our position. And that's why I treat him accordingly to his mission. If the spirit is a prophet, the body is a prophet. Spirit is a judge, the body is a judge. If the spirit is the Messiah, the body is the Messiah, right? We have to understand this, what that actually means, what the concept behind that means too. And that's why I was just like, boom. Like, even there's someone I met at church, that's one of the discussions we had. And it was like a very, very good discussion at the end of it. At the end of that message, we look at each other and we're like, yeah, there it is. We don't need to hear anything else, right? It's there. Just had to wait for it. Yeah. How long do you have to wait for it? 3 months? Maybe 3.5 months? Right? You didn't have to wait that long. And the hints were coming out even in past messages too. We had that last parable was hilarious. If you eat and drink and it's time to poop, right? You're gonna postpone it for a month or a year, 20 years? No, no. Person goes on his way, gotta excrete. History never stops in the same way. When you gotta poop, right? I was just like, oh, that in itself is a refreshing parable because it's like everyone gets it. When I gotta poop, right? So history is moving forward, and I hope that everyone is receiving more and more answers as we go. Okay? So there it is, guys. That is the word study for today. I hope you guys really enjoyed that. I loved the Sunday message. It was a hungry message. Tons of stuff I couldn't digest, but the stuff that I was listening to, and I was just in deep thought writing stuff down during the message because I was stuck on like one proverb while like 4 others have gone by because I'm like, whoa, that's so deep. Either way. So there it is, guys. That is the word study. I hope you guys really enjoyed that. That means let's move into the second break for the day.
When I look at you, it's like I got the whole room on the tip of my finger, and I'm pointing it right back to you. When I look at you, it's like I got the whole universe, the whole universe. Never thought that living could be easy, so you taught me right from wrong. Now I'm free to be full of love, full of hope. I'm empty of all things. Now I'm living to make everyone come follow me. This is a life worth living that I know. If I love someone else, what would he give me though? It's like I'm floating on clouds, my feet don't touch the ground. Life with you is like heaven, look at what I found. You said believe in me, don't change, and then you'll see a life that lasts for all eternity. And I will never live to have any regrets. I know you're the best, I'll step to the west, I'll follow behind you step by step. Just like the stars above, we shining, shining. Look at the world, in my hands the universe is my net. It's yours, can't escape from the love, it's yours. It's yours, can't escape from the love, it's yours. Just like the stars above, we shining, shining. Look at the world, in my hands the universe is my net. It's yours, can't escape from the love, it's yours. It's yours, can't escape from the love, it's yours. When I look at you, it's like I got the whole room on the tip of my finger, and I'm pointing it right back to you. When I look at you, it's like I got the whole universe, the whole universe. You said believe in me, don't change, and then you'll see a life that lasts for all eternity. And I will never live to have any regrets. I know you're the best, I'll step to the west, I'll follow behind you step by step. Just like the stars above, we shining, shining. Look at the world, in my hands the universe is my net. It's yours, can't escape from the love, it's yours. It's yours, can't escape from the love, it's yours. Just like the stars above, we shining, shining. Look at the world, in my hands the universe is my net. It's yours, can't escape from the love, it's yours. It's yours, can't escape from the love, it's yours. When I look at you, it's like I got the whole room on the tip of my finger, and I'm pointing it right back to you. When I look at you,
Okay, so let's get into the final segment for today. And of course, every single Monday we have 2G Talks with Eddie Kweon. And today, love the topic. It's about how to raise the second gen or raise the young people of our churches who at least for the time being right now may want nothing to do with faith, church, or God. How can we raise this next generation, right? So I'm looking forward to this because I'm working with a lot of the young people right now, and they're all second gen, but I hope you guys will enjoy this, all right? Everyone, please welcome all the way over there from San Francisco. This is Eddie Kweon with 2G Talks.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another week's episode of 2G Talks. I'm so excited to be here once again. It's kind of interesting. I think the more time goes on, and in the recent few weeks, and I would say the last few months actually, with regards to both this segment and some of the other segments on this channel, more conversations about, marriage, about blessed family, about even second generation, and about the future of Providence. Like all of those topics are coming up, right? And in essence, they're all kind of one in the same, in the not necessarily in the problem, but in the answer in the end, right? Like what the future will look like, it'll resolve all of those things all at once, right? So in essence, it's kind of the same question, it's the same problem. I really thought about this recently, how like interconnected everything is. Right, how interconnected people are, and I think I talked about this in the recent few weeks about like we kind of like create this web around us, right? And so one person is at the center of their own web, and the little actions that they take, it really expands beyond just them, and expands into their families, into their friends, into their churches and their relationships with different people, and so it's really important to see that we're not alone and that our actions have impact. But not just that, all of these, in another way, all of these questions that we're considering, like the things about the blessed families in Providence, and about, just marriage in general, about relationships, about our careers, about second generation, about the future of Providence, and, the 1,000 years to come. All of those things, that's a web in and of itself, right? And each of these components are part of this large web, and nothing is really completely isolated on its own, which is why I think addressing even one of these conversation topics, and one of these, I don't want to call them issues, but one of these topics, it actually expands and it touches into all of these other subjects as well. So that's something I think that we all need to keep in mind, and I think it becomes clearly evident, right? The more that we participate in these discussions with the MSD 117.8, whether it's through listening, or whether it's through writing comments, or whether it's by participating in the segment itself too. Like the comments I'm seeing, it kind of deals with a lot of these topics, even into like our own personal psychology and the things that we're feeling and thinking, and so we're kind of getting to the root of all of these things, right? And so I had an interesting conversation today with one of the SS here, and I'm really grateful that we had this opportunity. But we're talking about how for a lot of the youth, they go through a period, and he himself went through this period, and I actually went through this period too. But we weren't necessarily talking about ourselves, but he was even referencing some of his siblings and family members, and they talk about how if it has to do with the church, they're not at all interested, right? And this isn't just a motif found within Providence, but just in churches overall, right? And all across the world. And I wouldn't just say churches, but I would say like the institutions that bring the kind of values that we espouse, right? They don't want to have anything to do with them. And for someone who wants to give these kind of things and like give these kind of values to these kids, we want them to want these things, right? And so I was really thinking about this because I think this isn't a conversation topic that we get into all the time, but it is important, right? And I really only had this conversation topic with someone like this SS because he was so willing to open up about it and address it and talk about it. But when I was really thinking about it, it's interesting because I was watching this clip from this famous Korean YouTuber. He was actually a famous Korean celebrity, but he started making YouTube videos lately too. And they're talking about like how he has a daughter as well, right? And so like he said, one of the concerns that he has is like when his daughter reaches that sort of middle school, high school phase where she's going through puberty, that she's gonna start lashing out and and acting up and saying things and doing things, and he's not gonna know how to address it, right? It's kind of a famous thing in Korea, and I think there's a lot of reasons for it too. It's probably part of this education school system, probably part of the culture. Like when they hit that phase and that age, even though they were very mild mannered and they listened well and they were like really good kids, like good quote unquote kids, like growing up, when they hit the second grade of middle school or high school, they start lashing out and they really change in this sort of way. And it was really interesting because they were saying, I guess what they said in Korea, because this is what the person said on their YouTube channel, was that if your daughter starts acting up that way, you can't scold them or get angry or upset with them, because then they're going to get even more hurt. And not just that, they're going to act even, it's going to make things worse, right? And that's something that they've seen, like especially with the dads, or like dads make things worse when they try to step in, and they try to bring order when something like that's going down. But the funnier thing is, and they said this is also the part of the scary thing, is you also can't leave them alone. Like when they're going through these kind of emotions and these things, you can't leave them be, because if you leave them be, oh gosh, like all hell will break loose. And if you let them out of your sight, then they end up doing things that are way worse than them just acting up in front of you. And so I thought that was a really interesting thing. And I think Korean people have this thing where they think in and talk in like a teleological way, right? So they'll jump from A to C, so they won't really explain why. Like, oh, like why can't you leave them alone? And I think from a Western perspective, definitely an American perspective, it's more causal conversation. So it's like, okay, A, like when they hit puberty, they hit this sort of phase where they start acting up, and then B, if you leave them alone, then this happens. So C, you shouldn't leave them alone. So that's kind of like how the conversation flows, I think, in English, but in Korean it's quite different. And I think that's something that that's relevant to 2G talks in the sense that it's something that I had to get adjusted to after I immigrated to the US. And this is something that I've talked to with other older Korean second gen about, and they have also said the same thing, right? Like that a lot of times Koreans tend to talk in that sort of way. But I thought this was really interesting, and I felt that it's true too, and I wanted to see what other people think too, like, especially what other second gen think, and in particular, I don't want to say just girls too, but even for each of the second gen who've kind of maybe gone through a phase like that, maybe it wasn't that severe, maybe it was more severe, right? It's case by case. And even if you're not a problem in second gen, you might have just gone through this rebellious sort of phase too, but now that you're older, maybe you mellowed out, maybe you completely changed, maybe you're like, there's been a large shift in your thinking, right? Whatever it is. So like I think everyone can provide valuable input for this, but really what's the best way, right? Because outside, like once you're through that step, or if you're not in that step, then you want to offer what is ultimately the solution, right? And for us, like ultimately in overall, like if we're talking about something that encompasses the whole web, the answer is providence, right? It's the word. But when someone really doesn't want it, it's kind of like the thing that the celebrity was saying about like when they're going through that, what they don't want is their father's intervention, right? Their father trying to make things right in that moment, right? When things are going like haywire within that person, right? So it's like we were talking about what that was, and the thing that I felt that we had to do based on that example too was kind of like what the celebrity said too, about how they said you have to be there for them, and like not really get your hands dirty in that situation, but you also can't leave them be. And so like that's like the part about being patient with, like, even with second generation and with younger kids within Providence too. It's like really taking the time to make sure that they are okay, and right, we're not pushing things, but that eventually that they can come to this point. And so I think sometimes we might think like, oh, like, so does that mean we just have to hope for the best? And like I think people are uncomfortable with that notion. And yeah, like honestly, I'm uncomfortable with that notion as well. But at the same time, that is partially what it is to some degree, right? But the other degree, on the other hand, it really is that's the way that things work, right? But I'm also curious too if you guys think that there are other manifestations of this solution or a completely different solution of what might work. And I think this is something that we all need to address together because we want to do what's best for the future generation. And I do not mean just Providence second generation, but I do mean all the young people and the people going forward, because we don't want it to be a minority of youth who grow up to become well mannered in faith, right? We want it to be the majority, right? And I think it's like case by case, like culture by culture, because some places do better than others. But for maybe the ones that have struggled with this as a younger age, of course we leave it to God and we leave it to experiences. But what are the tangible things that we can do to help the future of Providence? And I don't mean the future of Providence isn't just our future, but really the future of the world, right? In all these senses too. Like, I don't know how the world's been in the part of the world that you are in, but really, even when we look at the schools and all the things that are happening in our immediate area here too, like some things are kind of jarring and they're shocking, and they're a lot different than things used to be, I think, even just a couple of years ago, and definitely like a decade ago or so. And maybe it's that I'm getting older too, but I do believe that it's not just that. I do believe that this is endemic to this generation, and so we want to find the solutions and the methods, because finding the solutions and the methods to these things, as I mentioned in the beginning, has implications on the entirety of the web outside of it. And it really impacts even us and all of these other things too. I think people recognize that, but sometimes we don't want to deal with these other questions and things because we think it's not related and doesn't directly impact us. But when we really see how it's weird, because this web that connects us all, it's sturdy in that, like, it really has this ripple effect, and it's so well connected, and it's also very fragile in that an impact in one area can really spread out into other areas too. Right? So it's weird, right? It's a very beautiful thing. I think I've been thinking more about this idea, looking at I've talked about this movie before, but if you guys have seen the movie Arrival, it's based on a series of short stories by Ted Chiang. And he's a brilliant writer, Taiwanese American writer, and I just read through like all of his short stories recently. He has a lot of interesting stuff, but that was really interesting because he kind of talks about it too. And in that story, it's weird because these aliens, they're aliens, but in some sense, I think he taps into his experience being an immigrant here in the U.S. And so in the movie, like in the book, like the people and the scientists and so basically human beings are trying to communicate with these aliens who have a completely different written and spoken language system, and in a way, like, I felt like that was like it's referencing like this part of, well, for him, like this part of himself that's like, when he was younger, trying to communicate between like his more American Western side with the more Asiatic, Taiwanese, Chinese, and East Asian side of like that mode of conversation. It's part of like the teleology versus causal sort of language speaking that we were talking about before in the segment too. And so I just saw this connection because in that movie, like these aliens, for us, when we write sentences, especially in in English, right, we write from one end to the other, right? We write from the left side to the right side, and we write one letter at a time. But these aliens, they write the entire sentence from one central location, and it's like they're writing all of the words simultaneously. Right, so it's like they have the sentence already written down in their head, and they write like one letter in each word, like separately as they're forming the sentence. So it's a really cool idea, and I think in part it kind of captures like part of the differences between like these two modes of speaking and thinking and even wiring our brains. And I think he beautifully captures it by like comparing it to like human beings talking to aliens who they can't regularly communicate with. But anyways, I hope today's topics were interesting, and these are kind of topics that I think really, like I said, embodies all of our futures. years. And I can't wait to see what God and the Trinity have to say about it too. But it's cool to see that our conversations as like the body, even here in MSD 117.8, it encompasses a lot of these things. So I'm very intrigued and interested in these things, and I have had many great conversations even in this last year with so many different members from so many different regions about so many different interesting topics that all seem interrelated in one way or another. And so I do hope to hear from people from this channel too, and the more people that I get to meet in person, who've listened to this segment or this channel, I would love to talk more about any of these topics, right, that interest you, because they are all interrelated, and I've seen that in these last few years. Well, anyways, I hope this conversation topic was interesting, and I'll see you guys on another week's episode of 2G Talks.
And thank you so much, Eddie, for another wonderful episode of 2G Talks. And this one, I think, is absolutely needed at this time. There are some youth, people who are not really interested in faith as much as we would like them to. But how do we take care of these kids and just really get them back into it? I'm dealing with it right now, dealing with like anywhere from 14-year-olds to 20-year-olds. And I'm working on this too, step by step, but I hope you guys really, really enjoyed this. You have any comments or questions? I think Eddie and I would love to hear your comments on this too. And if you have any more questions, then Eddie can answer them even on the next 2G Talks also. All right. So there it is, guys. That is today's episode. Hope you guys really, really enjoyed it. Have a fun and awesome Monday. And we'll see you guys again tomorrow on the Morning Star Drive on 117.8.
It's the Morning Star Drive 117.8. You soaring up with sky, now's the time, don't delay. I'm sitting in my ride and it's time to fly. So let's realign, just listen and fill your mind.
I'm burning with desire and the passion. Nobody can stop me when I'm